do we choose our mothers? Like as women, do we, let's say a woman in a heterosexual relationship, do we choose a man that represents our mother or our father and vice versa? Like how does that, I guess, come
Yeah.
to fruition?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately it's not that clean and clear.
I am super excited to welcome to the show today, Mari Grande. Thank you, Mari, for being on the show today. Really excited to talk to you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Mhm. So, you're a creative arts therapist, and I definitely have a lot of questions about that and about what you do. But first, I want to talk about your book or the subject of your book, Overcoming the Mother Wound. So for those listeners that have never heard of the mother wound, what is the mother wound and why should we know about it?
Well, the mother wound is it's actually something that we can't necessarily see. It's something that happens inside, and it most often happens very early before we even realize it's happening. It's a relational wound. For instance, if had you were feeling sad about something, and so you wanted to go to your room and feel it, and mom comes in and says, come on, you got chores to do, what are you doing moping around? Right there's a miss. So it's
Mm,
also a misattunement. um,
mm,
and then there's deeper wounds where there is actually outright criticism and neglect. And I don't expect a mother to be perfect, right? We're human, they're human. And as a matter of fact, it's been found that if a mother can be attuned and connected and responsive completely, just 30% of the time, you will develop a secure attachment. And I'm constantly being asked, what is a mother wound? What is a mother wound? And even though I may tell someone, they'll say, but what is a mother wound? And so somehow it's something that just, it's like you don't want it to be there. It's like, how can you say that about my mother?
mm.
And so I find it can be very evasive, but it's present. And you have one if you can start noticing it in your relationships and not just with other people, but with yourself.
Yeah. And even like the word mother wound, when I first heard it, like hearing that term, immediately it hit me. I was like, ooh,
Right.
like this is the deep stuff. Like this is like to me, the mother wound sounds really like in terms of healing, a really primal piece of healing or like a really primal piece of us.
Yes, it is. It connects to our ability to connect with ourselves.
Mm,
As you said, I'm an art therapist. So that is something in art therapy. When we're making art, we're actually involving the body. And when it's been found that when we are in a creative process, that that our amygdala, our alarm system, takes a break. So we can
mm,
actually be something rather than thinking something. And that wasn't always something that was available growing up with a mother wound. Um, And so a lot of the practices that I do, because I'm an art and trauma therapist. So I do art therapy and EMDR and somatic experiencing, hypnotherapy, all these different embodied approaches. And even though I don't call my book therapy, I'm still using those approaches, those embodied approaches, because if we're going to work with the early relationship, we're not going to be able to talk it through. We have to go into the body. And when I say into the body, it's simple. It's sometimes just going into your breath can access the body.
mm.
And that is our breath is the only thing that we have access to our autonomic nervous system. Everything else is automatic, but we can control our breath, and we can slow it down, we can speed it up, and that is connecting with our autonomic nervous system, which
Hmm.
is connected to our unconscious, which is connected to our experiences. And yeah, so that's why I find it so important and valuable to be using some of these less cognitive approaches. Not that you don't use your brain, but you need to be able to access more of a felt sense.
Yeah, being versus doing or thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm. So I do want to I definitely want to go back to like the whole embodiment and going into our body and just being. But before that, I do want to know, how does the mother wound in terms of like dating and relationships? Do you have some examples how it can show up and like get in the way or cause havoc?
Well, have you heard the expression, I married my mother or father?
Yes.
Well, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it through an attachment lens.
Yeah.
And the different attachment styles you probably know, there's the secure, the anxious, the avoidant, and the disorganized. And I can break those down if you'd like, but those are the main ones. And when
Can
you're
you break those down really quick for us?
sure, sure. Well, the secure is when the care was consistent, attuned, caring, safe, and good enough. And
Mm, I love that. Good enough. I really love that.
right. And that's a term actually Donald Winnicott, an early attachment. He actually was a pediatrician and he worked with children and he developed that term. He's a wonderful theorist. Um, and yeah, so the anxious is when there were no reliable adults, or if they were, um, they were too much to bear. So
Mm,
you develop like a fear of abandonment. You're relying on external approval. You usually have a negative self-image and sense of self, and others, an overly high image of others.
mm. Can I
And that,
ask you really quick, just with the anxious attachment style, because I've heard that women tend to fall into the anxious attachment style. So I wonder, like, how come it affects women more? Is it just because, like, do you have any kind of input on that?
well, I could just speak from my experience, which is, I think and it kind of goes into when I start categorizing the mother wounds, because the male mother wounds there are parallels and there are anxious men, and but I think it's more masked because they come from a place where I'm supposed to be the provider, I can't be vulnerable, I have to show this. And so it almost becomes like the second persona that they present.
Mm,
Doesn't necessarily mean there isn't anxiety underneath.
hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also there's a stance that we play, that when someone is anxiously attached, they tend to go to someone who's more ambivalent, which I was going to
Mm,
go to next,
yes,
which keeps
please.
distance. And that
Mm,
there's and then when the anxious starts getting distant, the ambivalent starts getting anxious. And it goes back and forth. So it's very much in relationship. So that's why even though I make these categories and there are these categories, there's still play within them. There's
mm,
life. They go like the nuances are about what happens in real life. Um, so, um,
hmm.
and let me just go back to I mentioned something about the anxious. So the avoidant is where you don't feel valued, you don't feel important, and you usually have to fend for yourself. So sometimes the avoidant can actually have a positive view of themselves. But again, there's that false self, and that's also something Donald Winnicott talks about, the false self. And so, but they prefer to maybe depend on have others depend on them rather than they depend on others.
Mm.
They rarely seek support, and it's really hard to get close.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're hitting a nerve right now. Because I always thought, like from childhood or like just in general that I was anxious. But actually, when I did the test, I showed up quite like I did have anxious, but I think avoidant was actually more dominant. And as you're saying this, like fending for yourself, not seeking support, like, whoa, yeah, that's
Mhm.
definitely, or it was me.
Right, right, right. Yeah. And as you um, learn about these styles, you realize, oh, I have this and I have that and I have that. But it's also sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, and depending on your situation too, and often depending on the relationship you're in or the
Mm,
space you're in. But yes, and I think that's very wise of you to notice it. It's not just one that you have a little bit of this, but you have most of that.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
Um, And then we go to the disorganized, and that's when you never know what to expect. And so this attachment style struggles to regulate, emotionally regulate. There's a desire for intimacy, but it's really hard to trust. There's a fear of being hurt, so they avoid attaching. And this is where the caretaker might have been really loving and then really scary. And so that becomes, you think of also maybe an alcoholic home where you don't know what to project. Or was that person super loving and then super abusive? That sort of disorganization really disorganizes psyche. And that's a real tough one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, so with these attachment styles, like how do they connect to the mother wound?
Well, if you can imagine that happening to you, being, feeling like you're alone when you like still need to be fed, or feeling like, is mommy okay? That you have to go take care of them instead of being taken care of you. That starts building what um well, there's different ones for men and different ones are women, even though they can go back and forth. And it can show up in like a critical mother wound where you feel like I don't matter, I'm too much, I'm too little, or you can be the invisible mother wound where I'm not important, I'm not seen, um, and I have to do it all alone. And that kind of that goes with the avoidant. And with mother wounds, you'll see characteristics like self-doubt, perfectionism, this imposter syndrome, even if you have proof of success, and that overriding, which, like I have these feelings, but they're not important. I can't feel these. I'm too busy doing this. Like this dismissing, because if
Mm,
you will dismiss yourself. A lot of self sabotage, loneliness, overcompensating. I don't want to make
mm.
sing here.
Yeah, well, I'm just, as you're listing these character traits or these, I guess, symptoms of a mother wound, with the podcast being called Dating Greatly and, the audience mainly being single women that are either, starting to date, maybe in the early stages of relationship or not quite sure. Man, this shows up so much in the dating phase, like the self-sabotage. Like, if you're on a date or if you're even just having a conversation, you're sending a message and you doubt yourself, like, did I say the right thing? Like, did I say something wrong? How's this person going to receive me? Or the imposter syndrome when you're getting ready to date. Like, I hear so many women say, well, when they talk about their vision for a partner for a life, is this realistic? this seems far-fetched, this seems fantasy, not believing that they're capable of something like that. So yeah, I can see a lot of this showing up in dating. What's your experience with how this shows up in relationships?
Well, when you have an unhealed mother wound, you tend to because our first relationship is usually with our mother, and that has a huge impact. It leaves like an imprint, right? So that's going to influence us consciously and unconsciously, and that's where it gets really tricky. And how we perceive it's going to affect how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive others. So, for instance, if your mother was cold, critical, mean, that may be who you find yourself with, someone who's cold, critical, mean, even though when you started dating, that wasn't so, it wasn't showing, right? But somehow you found yourself in that situation. So because with an unhealed mother wound, it's like you're in this fog and you think you're seeing things, but there's a whole nother layer that's being that 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 is impacting what you are doing and how you're feeling, what you're seeing. Something you might also see is like trusting too soon.
Mm.
When we have a mother wound that's not been dealt with, we it's really hard to connect inside. I say this is such an important part of the work that that happens with overcoming the mother wound is first connecting to that part of you that is so important, but has been missed. And sometimes you don't even realize that you missed it or that it was missed. And so that's why when it's almost like your Geiger counter is off. So you will find yourself in these situations and not knowing why. Why am I doing this again? Why do I keep on fighting this person? Well, it's it's I really think it can be traced back to something that is not that's still active inside of you. Not to blame anyone, but it's sometimes the work is very simple, and the simplest work can be the hardest.
Something that came up for me just now is again, you said a while ago we marry our mothers or our fathers. In your opinion, do we choose our mothers? Like as women, let's say a woman in a heterosexual relationship, do we choose a man that represents our mother or our father and vice versa? Or is it like how does that, I guess, come
Yeah,
to fruition?
yeah. Well, I unfortunately it's not that clean and clear. Um, for instance, I married I've married pieces of my mother and father. Some really good parts of them, and some other ones that obviously I still need to work on. But it's a matter of paying attention to that and go, whoa. And it's in that way it's still a healing journey. It's not a quick fix, but that
Mm.
bringing awareness to it is really crucial. And that and being with a partner that is open to working on that.
So in your opinion, does everyone have a mother wound to different degrees?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And like, how can we determine like what's the severity of our mother wound?
Okay. Well, I do have a quiz
Hmm.
on, you know, do you have a mother wound? And it's unescapable. It's just you can't avoid it because we know that we are human, we are imperfect. And when something happens when you're growing up, and like I gave a couple examples, like, if your parent gets angry or ignores you or says something that doesn't feel good. And as long as whatever happens is addressed in a timely, consistent, sincere, loving way, then that wound is healed right there. If it's continued to, it happens again and again and again, and no one's addressing it, it becomes a wound. I'm thinking of a client I had who who she was her mother was extremely critical about her appearance. It's unbelievable the things she quoted me. Unbelievable. And now she's an adult and she comes to me and she's this gorgeous young woman and she just lists off all the things that are wrong with her. It's and nobody, no matter how much positive feedback she can, she's that's just not true. And she's just has to deal with it. And it's I mean that's on the severe side of a mother wound.
I'm thinking about all the, women in my life and in general, women in general, the amount of insecurities we have about our appearance, whether it's body or whatever it is. And I'm not sure all of our mothers were critical, but I think a mother wound, and I'm not sure, tell me if I'm wrong, can also be developed just by an energy. So I know the women in my when it was my mother or my grandmothers, they were all had big insecurities about what they looked like or how they felt about themselves. And I I picked that up and so did my sister and I think so does every woman. So yeah, how much does like energy or just how a mother feels about herself, how much of a role can that play?
That's huge. That's just because I think you're bringing up another really important issue, which is the transmission of intergenerational, the intergenerational transmission of trauma.
Mm,
Happens through energy, through epigenetics. It's actually scientifically proven that it is passed down. And when because and we don't know what happened to grandma, what happened to great great grandma. And and just think of culturally the messages that have been given to us as women. And this is a huge, huge topic. And I think that having, because I'm not sure if any of your previous generations have worked on healing that trauma. Or maybe they did a little bit and then you do a little bit and it gets better and better. Or maybe there's still this piece that's still in there. So and I think that you do a lot of like work around energy too. So that's important that you're most likely ending that transmission,
mm,
um, because that is the only way. And I think there is an American Indian tribe, which I'm sorry, I don't know who it is, or I can't remember what it is, but that healing your generation heals the previous 7 generations backwards and 7 generations forward.
that's so powerful. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, that would be incredible.
Yeah.
If yeah, and I think the generation now, you know, um, healing and getting help and working through some of these insecurities, some of these limitations. Um, yeah, it's just been almost like it's definitely accepted, it's encouraged. It's almost like everyone is doing it on some level. So I think we're really lucky in that regard to be alive at this time and um yeah, I mean, I don't want to say we have a great responsibility, but I think with the awareness, the amount of information and knowledge out there, we can set our future generations up for success.
Yeah, I totally believe that that potential is there too. And, I think, uh, providing hope, providing resources is so important because there's so many wonderful modalities out there and programs. And, I'm like rooting for that mother wound. And there's other things that are happening that are just wonderful as well. But I think my passion is with this because it's so basic, it's so essential. And because even, even like before we started, we did a little grounding. And that connecting to self is just so important. I mean, we take it for granted, but just that simple pause. And I think that more and more um, of humanity is understanding that. And I don't know if it's my bubble, but there's or my bubbles out there, but I'm just hoping these bubbles can burst and spread because I think that's really that true healing happens when we can really go in and reconnect to this source that 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 hasn't been injured because we can get to that place, and it's such a relief when we can go there.
Hmm.
And I think even with dating, I think it's important for um, for like preparing to just really spend some time with yourself, really grounding and figuring out recalling like what makes you feel good. What like when even starting a journal, like what places, people, and things make me feel good, and making a note of that, and what don't. And so even when you're on your date, just kind of ticking that off, like this feels good. Oh, that's not so good. And oh, that's unacceptable. Just really tuning into that.
Hmm.
Something that most likely was ignored if you've had the different types of mother wounds that I discuss.
Yeah, really trusting our intuition, how things feel in our body, tuning into energy of another person, how that makes us feel. I love
Yeah,
that. So just something as simple as journaling can really assist in just, yeah.
absolutely. It's like it's reconnecting to us. Um, yeah.
Hmm. And so have you, I'm sure you've heard this, but like becoming our own mother, like remothering ourselves. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that we absolutely that is the key. But yes, and how do we remother ourselves in the way that we needed to be mothered?
Mm,
And that's the work. Um, and that's also why I like to have groups or um, of, of of people working on overcoming the mother wound, because then they start um, helping each other and like, well, wait a minute, I no, that's not. I think that you're being hard on yourself right now, and realizing, adjusting that internal
mm,
mother, because there's a default of like, oh, I got to do more, I got to do more. And so having the kind of corrective experiences with people you trust, um, and that is key to healing the mother wound, is really being around people that know how to love,
mm,
and people that can love you. And then you
yeah.
start learning at a very deep, deep level.
It's bringing up something for me, an experience I had just a couple months ago around sisterhood. And like, I think for women and specifically healing their mother wound, like the importance of sisterhood and having women around you. And I was a part of a women's circle, and we were sharing, and this day I allowed myself to, because being this avoidant, I never asked for support. I was like, I can handle it. I don't need to ask others for support. But I just allowed myself to cry in circle with these other women. And then it was just a magical experience because I don't know what I was crying about, but something about insecurities not being good enough. And then one after the other, like the women just came around me, and one put her hand on my knee, and one put her hand on my back, and one laid her head in my lap, and one like I was just like in this embrace of about 6 or 7 women. And like I really bawled at this point because it was so vulnerable. But in that moment, I felt so held and mothered, and I allowed myself to release and let go and be held by other women. And that to me has been one of the most potent experiences of my adult life.
Oh, that sounds so beautiful. Yeah. It
Yeah.
sounds like a rebirth.
Yeah, it almost it was in a way, yes. Yeah, and just having that relationship with another woman, whether in circle or with just one other woman, and for me, the importance of women's hands, like
Mm.
being on me in a loving way. And I guess that's where we could go back to this embodiment and tapping into the body and how we can use that to heal this as well, if you can speak to that.
Yeah. Well, again, these wounds are very early and they were felt wounds. And so when we want to connect to that place in us that's hurt, vulnerable, scared, we need to be able to go there. And one of the, like when we use art, for instance, we are giving ourselves, we're just in that being space. And they actually have an exercise using that, using art making, because even with art making, there can be this critical voice.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And it's this whole 6 step process that I do with the combination of um, writing, drawing, writing, drawing. And it really taps into that inner critic and sort of connecting with it and containing it. And because when things are in the shadow, we don't know what they are. We just know that something's going on. So we need to really bring light to that, see it, feel it, and release it. We want to get to that, our reptilian brain, which
Mm.
is just all about impulses, because that's what we are first born with. Our just we have our heartbeat and movement and all that, and then we start getting our limbic brain, our emotional brain. So those are the early places that we want to connect with. We start getting the thinking brain that takes us offline, takes us
Mm.
out. So when we are in that base place with just basic instincts and emotions, that's where we want to go because there's without that chatter. So we can really be in that space.
Yeah, so with art, like why is it important to use art and like these embodiment exercises to heal the mother wound or any other internal wounds that we have?
Yeah, it comes back to that non-thinking, just being. And that
Mm.
can happen with when we start drawing. And I often use non-dominant hand drawing and writing because even though we can that our chatterbox can be really, really tricky. So it's important to sometimes just, to become as just to be allow yourself to be as messy as non linear as possible to really let yourself just be. And I find that working with art does that. Um, and even like using writing prompts using non-dominant hand also accesses that place that is not so bossy.
So for people that are listening that are like, oh, I'm no good at art. I don't know how to draw because like there is that criticism in a big way that comes up.
Absolutely.
What can you recommend to get past that barrier?
Well, I have in my in the course that I have on overcoming the mother wound, the first thing I do is I hand out an artist license, which gives you permission to make a mess, to do things wrong. Because that how can you create something unless you make a mistake? It's just not going to happen. It's like how can you if you want to have that perfect line and you don't know how to draw yet, it's just not possible. So it's a matter of understanding what's real, and it's a matter of also giving permission. Sometimes I know it's hard, but even giving yourself like writing yourself a permission slip. It's okay to make to not to make an imperfect drawing. It's
Mm.
okay, maybe even intentionally, like I'm going to draw like I'm in kindergarten. And some of the exercises I have are really about the just expression because there's no right or wrong way to express yourself. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what also art therapy is about. It's not about the creation, it's about the process. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I also use the mandala a lot, which is the circle.
Mm-hmm.
I find that really helpful because it's a container. It's also a focuser. It also represents the world. It represents the womb. So I find that a really healing modal tool to use when we're doing a lot of the exercises.
Mm-hmm.
One of the a real simple one is to, for instance, um, one of an early exercise might be to, like, I have them like draw, draw your kitchen, and then I give you like 2 minutes to do that, and then after that, write down all the things you said to yourself, negative and positive, and separate them. And then put what you want inside the mandala, what you want to keep and what you want to let go on the outside of your mandala. And even that starts working with your mirror neurons, because you start seeing like, oh, this is what I want, and ugh, that's outside. And when you spend time with just even simply being with that, looking at that, it starts sinking in, because that's how we learn things, is through our mirror neurons.
Mm-hmm.
So things were modeled to us from our mother through our mirror neurons. Did mother smile at you when you were feeling good? Or did she have a frown on her face when you were glad about something? And that kind of messes up those connections we have, our learning.
Mm-hmm. I can see how this incorporating art and getting out of our minds and like some of the exercises you're talking about, it's would be so beneficial too to women that are entering like the dating phase or in relationship. Like there's so many metaphors here
Yeah.
about, like your vision. What do you like? What don't you like? And also like, here's your permission slip to mess it up. Like, go ahead.
Right.
This is about the experience. It's about you expressing yourself, being your real you, authentic you, and attracting the person that is a good match for you or like the best match for you. And yeah, I think just learning to express ourselves authentically when maybe we've been afraid to or have received so much criticism in our childhood when we do express ourselves, like it's so important to come back to that. And I can really see how art can play a huge role in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And even coming back from a date and just scribbling to see, you're not even knowing, what you're feeling, but just scribbling, and then afterwards noticing like, oh, I didn't know it was like that, like if you're the colors you use or whatever, but don't think about it beforehand. Just like, um, we call that response art. So
Mm,
kind of interesting to do, is to just see what happens, and like, but again and again, if, like you said, kind of dating is like, if it's hard, but if you can think about it as um an exercise, like I'm doing this, like, like I'm
mm,
taking a course on dating, and just doing these little exercises afterward, before and afterwards, and start keeping a folder.
yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. Awesome. Getting back to again the like healing this mother wound and healing our deep set issues, our primal patterns, I guess. Do we need our mother to heal the mother wound? Do we need to involve her? Do we need to have conversations? Do we need to sit next to her?
It depends on your mother. Some mothers aren't available, some mothers aren't capable, some mothers aren't interested, and some mothers are, but they don't know how. And if that's the case, then that's actually quite ideal, if they are willing. Because sometimes it can be more painful to try to, it's almost like re-traumatizing yourself, because now you know all this stuff, and you go into to work with it, to heal it, and it's like, what? You're so ungrateful, or so that's something you want to be,
Mm,
and just, you know again, knowing yourself helps you also maybe see your mother a little clearer, And
Hmm.
but it's not, you don't need to do the healing with her. I
Hmm.
mean, wonderful if that's possible. It's not always, and sometimes it's preferable to not even have her involved in extreme cases. Yeah.
So, the book that you wrote, Overcoming the Mother Wound, what made you write, or what made you want to write this book? And maybe if you have some of your own experience that you want to share.
Yeah. A mother wound is very much like um, complex PTSD. And that's a relational wound that happens again and again and again early on. And it's not healed, it's repeated. It's not addressed, it's repeated, and you find it later in other relationships. And adults have PTSD, CPTSD, complex PTSD. So in my practice, in my private practice as a therapist, I was seeing a lot of my clients that had issues with their parents, primarily their mothers. And I had um, I was noticing a lot of women were much more vocal about it. And I had this one client who said to me, who would get, we did great work. She'd go home, be back to where she started. Great work, come back. It was this yo-yo. And she says to me in exacerbation, can't you can you find me a group for daughters of critical mothers? And I said, oh, yes, that sounds great. So I looked, and this was a while back, and I couldn't find one. And so and then I said, wait a minute. I have a bunch of women that have this issue. So let me see if I can form a group. So that was going on for a while. And then I realized, men wanted to come in too. And also, I felt like it was being a little too, I negative. So I said I wanted to, because women were healing. So I said, let's make it overcoming the mother wound. So that's why I switched that. And then um, so I had this course and this group. And then I said, let me do a book. Because as I was creating the course, we kept on referring to the modules as chapters because it just felt like a progression and it had a
Mhm.
learning. So I basically took that course and turned it into this book. So if you're reading the book or if you're taking the course, you can join this membership, um, and that gives you access to monthly meetings, and it gives you there's extra exercises, extra guided meditations, and it's a whole program, and it's 24/7. So there's a lot of support. So that's how I developed this book. And yeah. And then I definitely have my attachment issues. And I part of creating this has been so healing for me.
Mhm.
And I'm like, whoa, why wasn't this when I was coming up? So it's very personal. I feel like it's very organic because it grew out of
Mhm.
a need. It's not like I'm like, oh, I'm going to create this program. It came out of a need. And so I'm hoping that this book is going to be able to reach more people. And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's some really important work you're doing. And I'm sure you saw firsthand of how impactful your work is. And I would love to know, like, some of the women that joined this course, like, or the group at the very beginning, like, Daughters of Critical Mothers, at the end when they, completed the program or went through this with you, like, what were like the biggest transformations that you noticed in them?
Well, um, finding work was one of them. They were underemployed, and self-confidence was very small. Another got married. Um, another one is dating, and yeah, they doing quite well.
Wow, yeah, it sounds like liberated and living their life without the shackles of the past.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and actually, one became a therapist. She was she had the education, but she didn't want to do that work, and
Mhm.
she got the confidence to, hey, this is really important stuff. Let me go finish it. So
I love that. I love that. If you could give the women and probably the odd man listening one piece of advice or just like one thing to kind of take on their way today, what would that be?
Hmm. Well, I think keeping a journal to start logging yourself, logging when you feel your best. Just really paying attention to that. When you feel your best, what's going on? Who are you with? Where are you? And how long do you stay there? And just kind of because it's a form of self-reflection. And because it's this work is a lot about building a relationship with yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Mari, what's the best way for listeners to connect with you and check out your book, check out your program?
Yeah, the best way is through my uh, teaching and coaching website, which is creativehealingintegration.com. And on that, it lists so creativehealingintegration.com, and it has a place where you can purchase my book. It has my courses, my Overcoming the Mother Wound. There's a whole program for that. And also there's a resource section, and that has some free resources. And there's also a quiz on that on do I have a mother wound? Um, and you can also follow me on Instagram at Creative Healing Integration. I don't know if you're gonna have a show notes where we can send you the links to the quiz and the course and the book and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'll make sure to list all those in the show notes, the quiz, the book, everything will be there for easy access. Um, yeah, so actually, one thing before we wrap up for today, I want to know, I seen the most powerful movie on the mother wound recently, and I'm wondering if you've seen it. So this film is with Joaquin Phoenix and it's called Beau is Afraid. Have you seen it?
How old has it recent?
It's very recent. I think it's this year or last year.
Oh,
Yeah,
is it?
if you get a chance to watch this film, oh my God. It's all around the mother wound. It's a ride, this movie. There is, yeah, so much. I would love to chat with you again after you watch this movie. I highly recommend it. Yeah, it's just it knocked me out of the water. It was crazy. Like, yeah, it's just a ride, but afterwards, like my partner and I were probably for the next hour just like dissecting like the symbolism, the metaphors, like what did this mean? And all around like mental illness,
Mm,
around the mother wound, around like a very critical mother, what that can do to a man. Like, yeah, it was
oh,
pretty
that sounds
intense.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I talk about how mental illness does come into the mother wound. It's almost always there.
Okay, well, it's been awesome hearing more about this today, and it's been great talking to you. And the final question before we wrap up for today, what song are you dancing to nowadays?
Okay. Um, I have I've I've two songs.
Hmm.
One is when, like in the morning, when I want to wake up, I'll like shake, do the like, the whole thing. And that's what I
Mm.
like to listen to. Pump It by the Black Eyed Peas. That gets me moving. Drives my
Oh,
husband.
cool. Thank you so much, Mari, for chatting with me today and for um, helping us understand this subject a little bit better and the importance of, yeah, remothering ourselves. And thank you for the really important work that you do. I hope everyone checks out your book and your website.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the work you're doing as well. And your podcast is just so well paced, and I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.